Let's take a look at heritage.
Although we often flaunt our nation's cosmopolitan tapestry, we still seem to struggle to define what is authentic Canadiana. Yet when we do settle on a term, rarely does urban hip-hop culture pop up at the forefront of the conversation. Now with over 25 years of established hip-hop history inside of our country's borders, we can now look around to a growing demographic of Canadians whose primary music and cultural influences are urban. Overstepping the boundaries of gender, ethnicity, and community, Canadian hip-hop has emerged as a key lifestyle choice for many making up our great population. Our next group of panelists will discuss just how they came to choose and adopt a sound and culture that didn't necessarily reflect the cultural heritage of their households. On deck from left to right, we have DJ Andre 905, new up-and-coming DJ in the city, representing the Brampton area. We also have DJ Grouch, member of the World Team Turntablist Champions Turnstiles crew and co-founder of Scratch Lab, Canada's leading DJ school in Canada. We also have T.O. Flo, my partner from Toronto Morning Live, and better known as the woman behind everything that is TOFlo.com. We also have Grand Whiz in the building again. You heard him inside of the music segment. We're going to have him back again on the heritage to discuss how Canadian hip-hop influences our Canadian heritage. Now, hip-hop in Canada has moved beyond the limits of ethnicity, but I left you guys a couple of questions to discuss what was going on. And as hip-hop, and I guess the first question that I had for the people on the outside was, has hip-hop had a defining influence on your lifestyles, choices, and your lifestyle choices and cultural identity? And I'm going to just go from left to right, and then we'll go from there. So again, the question for everybody on the inside is, has hip-hop had a defining influence on your lifestyle choices and your cultural identity?
Yeah, for me, personally, I would say yes, it has. Because just in terms of the way that we dress and the way that I talk and even the way that I live my life, it's very much influenced through the music and through the culture. And for myself personally, I would say yeah, that it has. Because for me, hip hop is always ever since I was a small kid, I've always been into the culture in terms of even break dancing and DJing and stuff. And so for myself personally, it has.
Definitely. Grouch, you want to chime in on that one?
Definitely, man. I have to agree with Andre on that. Me personally, kid growing up in Toronto, immigrant, and just being around other kids my age, and we were there when it first started. You know what I mean? And just hearing this music that just had this everything to do with it, but just a way of dressing, the dancing, graffiti. It was just so it took over everything for me, and I've always lived my life by following the culture and staying true to it, even being an adult now. You know what I mean? So it's crazy. So
sounds good. Flo, if you can chime in on that topic.
Yeah, I have to agree in that as we're growing up, we all adapt to some sort of urban trend that was happening there back then and now. I mean, all down to the cars we drive or the mobile device that we carry. I don't think it's just about dancing and dressing, but I mean, it's an everyday element for myself, because I can't really say I dress hip hop, but I listen to it and I talk about it on a regular basis, and the music always, anytime I hear an old school track, it definitely brings me back to a time where I know what I was doing back then, whether it was kicking rocks in the park or stealing candy from the corner store. You see it in videos, you see it in movies, you always want to be that cool kid. But yes, I definitely think it's it plays throughout, even up to today.
Grand Whiz.
Yeah, I'd say it's pretty much a rhetorical question. I think the influence of hip-hop just outside of hip-hop itself is even undeniable. We even kind of have a hip-hop president of the United States. Just the influence everywhere. You could just see and touch and feel it. And as far as when I was growing up, you still had Public Enemy kind of, dropping political influences and getting your mind to look at things in different ways other than, the cookie cutter culture. So I think for all of us, even people who don't necessarily listen to hip hop full time as their own pastime, like just people who are even outside or part time, even a lot of rock and roll influenced people tend to borrow that hip hop swagger and mentality of just presenting themselves or just their own personalities. I think once you start to appreciate the music, it starts to have an effect on like your full personality.
Definitely. Now, talk to Cass Elliot, who is a urban promoter in Winnipeg. Lived in Nova Scotia, moved out to Vancouver, spent some time in Toronto, and has done some shows with Jonathan Ramos and so on. But his story is a little bit different than ours growing up in Toronto. So I'm going to take a minute to let Cass in on the conversation, and then we're going to come back and we're going to discuss some of the similar questions that go into what Wiz began to discuss. Right here inside CHRY 105.5, this is Canada's Getting Colder.
I grew up on the East Coast, in small town Nova Scotia, and kind of my first introduction to hip hop, when I was like 14, 15-year-old, was just all we had really was graffiti. We had NCJ and Full G would come through and teach their basketball camp. And, other than that, that was our only connection to any kind of a hip-hop culture. It was very spoon-fed, right, coming from there. Just, we only saw what Master T was putting on TV. And, that's all that we could really get down with. And someone would go to Halifax and, pick up some new tapes. Came up on the Halifax early super indie scene with, Buck 65 and 6'2" and all these mostly white dudes that were doing rap music out there, and that became a scene there. I guess what I'll say is definitely my cultural identity, I have a hard time saying yes for some reason, but my lifestyle choices has definitely been guided by that.
And that is Cass Elliot, one of the promoters out in Winnipeg. Lived in Nova Scotia, took his travels over to Vancouver, and is now in Winnipeg, continuing hip hop culture. And we had a further conversation.